Alrighty, so this year I am going to do something a little different. So usually around this time of the year, I do a video where I fill out the bracket and predict who is going to win MLS Cup this year. But this year I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to do a video where I'm going to look at all 18 of these playoff teams and just kind of put them in tiers in terms of, are they considered to be the favorites of going to win MLS Cup, or are they going to be the one that could go on a deep run? Are they the dark horse heading into the playoffs? And are they the team that, if everything goes right, they can still make a deep run? Or are the teams that are kind of in the bottom tier where, yeah, we don't really expect them to do much? It's one and out. It's pretty much them needing a Cinderella run to go deep into the playoffs. And the reason why I decided to do this is because after looking at how bad I did in terms of Western Conference and Eastern Conference prediction, and knowing that, last year I don't think I did very well in terms of filling out the bracket. Yeah, I'm gonna try not to jinx team this time, and instead, you can't really blame me for jinxing your team when I put them in different tiers, unless if you believe that when I put them as a favorites, that maybe count as me just kind of jinxing the fact that, yeah, they're probably gonna get knocked out in the first round, even though I put them in the favorites tier. But that being said, let us begin. We'll start with the Eastern Conference, and we're gonna go alphabetical order. So Atlanta United is going to be that team. And you know what? For Atlanta, I mean, I think they could definitely go on a deep run. But the problem for Atlanta, I will say, is that first matchup against Columbus. I mean, that's not really a matchup that I would say a matchup that they want to face against Columbus. But then again, I mentioned before the Eastern Conference, it was going to be a bit of a bloodbath, and that there are some really good teams, I think, in the Eastern Conference, where if you put them in the Western Conference right now, those teams probably would have beat most of the team in the West, but because they're on the Eastern Conference side of the table and they're facing against other Eastern Conference team that is very good. Yeah, this is where Atlanta could maybe be miss out. Either way, that should be a heck of a matchup, and that if they do win that matchup, I can definitely sense that they could go on a deep run. And this playoffs, I think this could be one that I know Atlanta fans are happy that they're back into the playoffs, but they want more. Like, that's kind of the thing with Atlanta United and their expectation that they are always supposed to be a team that's supposed to go through a deep playoff run and always have had some success, and that, yeah, they're gonna have to try to see if they can meet that expectation, especially the fact that, when you look at the current team that Atlanta United has had, this is probably one of the more talented Atlanta United team that we've seen in previous time, and it feels like they finally got it right. So we'll see whether they can get that and maybe go on a deep run. Though again, it all depends on that first game against Columbus. Then we go to FC Cincinnati. Yeah, they're definitely the favorites. I mean, FC Cincinnati, they finished at the top of the Eastern Conference for the whole year. We talk about how they are the favorites of winning MLS Cup. But the one concern I will say about Cincinnati is that they have not really played very well in the last couple of games. And that could be a concern with the way that, when we look at playoffs, you always want to hit your stride when the playoff time begins, because if you don't hit your playoff stride, you kind of stutter near the end. That could come into the playoffs too. And not to mention, because Cincinnati did win the Supporter Shield, and I know last year LAFC won the Supporter Shield, they went to win MLS Cup. That was something that we have not seen in a long time. In fact, the last time I think we saw that was 2017 with TFC. But other than that, it's been a while since we have seen a team that win the Supporter Shield and end up winning MLS Cup. That Supporter Shield curse is still a thing, and that for Cincinnati, they're going to have to try to avoid to do so. And especially, after what we saw in the Leeds Cup in that knockout tournament where they got that surprising first round exit against Nashville, I don't think that's going to give a lot of Cincinnati fans confidence that they can maybe go deep in the playoffs by judging on that Leeds Cup uh, playoff round kind of failure that they had. But still, I do trust the fact that Pat Nolan will get this right. And not to mention, when you have a guy like Lucho Acosta and just so many difference maker on the attacking end, I think this team could definitely go deep into the playoffs and outright potentially win this whole thing. I mean, again, because of how strong the Eastern Conference is compared to the West, it feels like whoever or make it to MLS Cup out of the East, you could say that they could potentially be heavy favorites or hoisting MLS Cup this season. Then we go to the Columbus Crew, and again, I put Columbus in the same position as Atlanta. again, this series is going to be really fascinating, and that I really think whoever wins this one will feel like this is a statement have made, and they can definitely go deep into the playoffs. So yeah, I basically put them in the same spot. I mean, again, I put Columbus in the same category as Atlanta because they definitely have some electric weapons, especially on the attack. I mean, when Wilfred Nancy is able to get the best out of this team, nobody can stop this team. I mean, this team is just too good on the attacking end. But the one concern I do have with this Columbus team is on the back end of things because while the attack is very good, the back end lets a lot to desire. And if there's one thing we've seen with these teams that have won MLS Cup, a lot of these teams needs to make sure not only they have a good attack, but also on the back end they lock it down. And because of the fact that Columbus had at time looked vulnerable on the defensive end, and also not to mention, their road form hasn't really been that spectacular. So once we do get deeper into the playoffs where they have to play on the road, because it's not very often you see a team finish in fourth in the standings and they will have playoffs home game throughout the rest of the playoffs. But if they want to make sure that they go deep into the playoffs, they definitely needs to win those road game, and it all starts again with a huge game in this one against Atlanta. Though I will say that if there is one team that in terms of recent history that Columbus has done well on the road, it's against Atlanta United of all teams. They have been a team that has caused problem to Atlanta when they play against them at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But like I said, that should be a heck of a matchup. I mean, if you want to talk about a matchup and rank each of these matchup, which are the hottest matchup to watch out for in the first round, this has to be the one because I expect there's going to be some explosive kind of action. And if you are a person that likes to see goals in the playoffs, this could be the matchup you could see. Then we go to Charlotte FC. For Charlotte, I think they're in this category where, if everything goes right for them, they could make a deep playoff run. And a lot of that has to do with that, when you look at the talent wise, this is definitely a team that lacks that talent. And I will say that, the concern with this team with them seems to have this tactics of just kind of holding on for dear life and hope for the best is probably not a good strategy you want to have when it comes to playoff time. But then again, when you look at this team, they actually have performed really well as we head into the playoffs. In fact, they actually have had a bit of an unbeaten run coming into the playoffs, so they have had some good decent resort. Though some of these resort weren't actually wins, but actually draws, and that in the playoffs you need to win your games if you want to move on to the next round. But yeah, if everything goes right, if Christian Kalina can be God mode like he did against Inter Miami, if both Schradets he can score those goals for this team, which we know that he can definitely do. So don't be surprised. Charlotte might go on a bit of a deep run. And again, I think the other thing I will say about Charlotte, as it is the case for some of these teams that don't really have a lot of expectation, because after all, this is the first ever playoff appearance for Charlotte. I think their fans are probably happy at the fact that they made it to this stage. So whatever happened until then, with them just kind of playing for house money, they'll be happy even if they do resort in an early playoff round exit. Then we move on to Nashville. Ooh, Nashville is going to be tough. And I mean, for Nashville, I would say they got to be along in this category where, once again, it's everything that goes right. And a lot of that has to do with just if they can find that form that they had in the Leeds Cup tournament, where, in the Leeds Cup tournament, really out of nowhere, the fact that they perform back to the rate that they were in the early part of the season. Hani Mukhtar was going nuclear. That defense was really solid. They need to do that again in the playoffs because as we have seen ever since that Leeds Cup final loss that they had against Miami, this team has looked stagnant just like they did before coming into the Leeds Cup tournament. But like I said, I think one thing that Gary Smith can at least rally his troop is the fact that, hey, we're in this position again where nobody believed that we can go deep and win the whole thing. And look what happened in the Leeds Cup. Nobody believed that we could be the one that made it to the final, and they made it all the way to the final. So yeah, I think that's going to be something that they're going to use as an inspiration. But really, it's just mainly if Hani Mukhtar is just going to go absolutely nuclear, and maybe some of his supporter cast can basically take the shoulder off him. I mean, guys like Sam Surge and Tim Teal Bunbury, those are kind of the guys I'm going to be talking that needs to really step up. They're trying to take that pressure off of Hani Mukhtar because you know teams are going to try to double or triple team Hani Mukhtar, knowing that that is the weapon. And also, I think the other thing that Nashville needs to make sure it works in this playoffs is that transitional game. If that transitional game went right, and if that transitional goes just as potent as what we've seen them before, they can definitely go deep in the playoffs. But if that transitional attack doesn't work, then it could be an early exit, as what we've seen with this Nashville team for the past couple of seasons, and that would be considered disappointing if you're a Nashville SC fan because you just feel like you want to finally get over the hump, and it seems like this year could be the case. But yeah, the recent resort hasn't really show that they could get that done and get to the next stage where they can go deeper into the playoffs than they ever before in their short time in MLS. Then we go to the New England Revolution. Yeah, for New England, I think it's pretty clear that they are here where they need a Cinderella run. They need something that is just going to be an absolute Hollywood script kind of story, and just kind of just probably the greatest kind of against all odds kind of story that we've seen a team done, because this team has just been completely wrecked with injury. And while they do still have some good decent weapon, I mean they still have Carlos Hill that is still doing Carlos Hill thing. And then the good news is Gustavo Bo is back in this team. But other than that, I mean, there's been kind of big question mark in this team. And then on the defensive front, they look very fragile too, because most of their defensive reinforcement are also injured right now. So yeah, this is a team that I've said before. It seems like whoever faced this team is going to definitely like them to play in the playoffs, and that's kind of the case if you're the Philadelphia Union. But that being said, we saw what happened on decision day, where I mentioned that was a wake up call for the Philadelphia Union, because you do not want to take like this New England team lightly. They definitely earned themselves to make it to the playoffs, and with all those on and off field distraction that's going on, it's still incredible that they eventually didn't really just go on complete meltdown mode and complete free fall mode, as some people might have thought that they would go through. And now I would say that if they can rally the troop, and maybe somehow how go on just an absolute Cinderella run, maybe they will surprisingly fulfill something that they were thinking that they're going to do this season, which is reach MLS Cup and go deep into the playoffs. But then we go to the New York Red Bulls. Same thing. They need a Cinderella run. Again, I don't like these teams are the teams that near the bottom tier where I don't think they're gonna do too much unless they go through a Cinderella run. And a lot of that has to do with, it's great that they keep that playoff streak alive, but I think that's kind of the only thing that if you're a Red Bulls fan, you can celebrate, because when you look at this team, I mean, if you talk about some of the weakest team in the playoffs in terms of talent wise, the Red Bulls is definitely right up there. I mean, I just don't know they have enough on the attack to really get things going. I mean, their defense are at least are going to keep them in games, but I have a lot of question in terms of the attack. And also, not to mention that So Metro moment is always kind of looming around the corner. It's kind of like an annual tradition that we've seen 14 years or 13 years in the making. And don't be surprised, it could be 14 years in the making. I mean, I would say that when you compare it to this Red Bulls team to last season, I feel like this team is even worse than last season. And that because of how last season team kind of imploded, don't be surprised it might be the same thing again this year. Then we go to the Philadelphia Union. I think the Union is definitely going to be the favorites. I mean, I will say that in the latter part of the season, just like what I said about Cincinnati, it hasn't really been impressive of how Jim Curran and his team has gone through. And that again, that game against New England that they will play in that best of three series, they got to make sure they take the ref seriously, because I think maybe that game could be used as a wake up call that it's not going to be route one and just routine that they can easily beat the New England Revolution and move on into the next round. But the bottom line is, for this Union team, the message is clear. It's MLS Cup or bust, and especially with the rumor that Bedoya might not be back heading into next season, and he's not going to sign a new contract. And maybe Kyle Wagner is another player that could not be back. Those are two really key pieces that the Union could lose this offseason. So this feels like it's kind of almost like a one last hurrah for this for the major part of this core to go on this run, because yeah, with just so many failures that this Union team has had and so many wasted potential that this core has had. I mean, it's hard to believe they have not won a trophy despite having such a good core for the past couple of years. You would feel like this has got to be it. This has to be the year that they break through. It's really MLS Cup or bust or MLS Cup or disappointment once again for this Philadelphia Union team. Then we go to Orlando City. So as much as I said Philadelphia is definitely a favorite, I would say Orlando City could be a favorite too. I mean, right now they are the hottest team right now in MLS that is not named the Houston Dynamo. In fact, you could say that they're pretty much the hottest team right now in the Eastern Conference. This team is just like they are just sizzling hot with how they've been playing, and we have seen before where when teams reach a really hot form heading into the playoffs, they stay hot even into the playoffs, and I will not be surprised if this Orlando City team is gonna cause some upset. I think their first matchup that they're going to be facing it's against Nashville, which it won't be easy, but I do think Orlando does have enough, especially Oscar Herrera team wants some revenge after what happened a couple of years ago when they got knocked out by Nashville in the playoffs. So yeah, I do think that this Orlando City team, this is a team that I think is by far the strongest Orlando City team that I've seen heading into the playoffs, even stronger than when they made it to the playoffs in their first ever season. And I do believe that there could be something special brewing down in Central Florida in terms of this team could really go into a relatively deep run into the playoffs and maybe could be that team that could outright win the Eastern Conference this year. Then we go to now talk about the Western Conference because we now talk about all the team in the Eastern Conference. I just realized that I kind of went a little out of order in terms of the alphabetical order. I should have said Orlando first instead of Philly, but nevertheless, let's talk about the Western Conference, and we start with FC Dallas. Yeah, for Dallas, it's kind of I would say it's kind of right here too, where it's like they need a Cinderella run, and I hate to say this, but it just feels like this is going to be another year where Dallas could be heading into a first round exit, and that they could be losing a playoff round in the hands of their least favorite opponent to face the playoffs, and that of course is the Seattle Sounders. And a lot of that has to do when you look at this team. I mean, yes, I know they scored 4 goals against the Galaxy, and I know that attack finally break through. But again, how much is that because they faced the Galaxy, and how much is the fact that the return of Kumungo definitely helped boost this team? But now he did came off with an injury, and you don't know if he's going to be available for this team in the near future because again the fact that this team has had problem in terms of scoring, and it's good that the Kamungo has brought that to his table in that game against the Galaxy, but because he's now injured again, or FC Dallas is pretty much back in the same situation that they were before. I mean, I just don't think that they have the enough attacking talent, and especially I feel like compared to last season, I do feel worse about this team this year in terms of their chances of going deep, and that's kind of been the problem for this Dallas team, where it's like, well, they're good enough to make it to the playoffs, but they're not good enough to go pretty deep into the playoffs, and that's kind of the purgatory that sometimes Dallas fans will have to live with, and it feels like it could be the same case unless if they can finally break through and have a Cinderella run this year. And the attack that we saw against the Galaxy was not just a blip. It looked like it was a kickstart of them finally getting things going on the attacking end. Then we go to the Houston Dynamo. Yeah, they are definitely a dark horse team. I've said it before. This is a team that I won't be surprised they could go deep into the playoffs. Now, obviously, when you look at a Ben Olsen led team, Ben Olsen hasn't really led his team deep into the playoffs very often. I mean, even doing his DC days, he didn't really let this those DC United team to really deep playoff run. Besides that one U.S. Open Cup final win that they had back in 2013, but still, when you look at this Dynamo team, I feel like this has been a season that's been coming for a while, where finally the rebuild that they've been going through has been successful, and that this is a team that I talk about Orlando City being one of the hottest team coming into the playoffs. Houston is definitely that team. I mean, that last game against the Portland Timber just solidified me thinking that this is a different Houston Dynamo team that we've seen before. This is a team that I think is going to surprise everybody and is going to continue to make noises, and especially when they do play play at home, yeah, forget about it. You know that you're not going to get any resort against this Dynamo team. Now, obviously, the one big concern I will say about this Houston team is the lack of experience in the playoffs, and there's that old cliche of if you about the experience in the playoffs and how much that matters. That could play in a factor to this Dynamo team because a lot of these players don't really have a lot of playoff experience. Though there are some players that definitely has. One of those players is Steve Clark, especially doing his day for the Portland Timbers. But yeah, again, when you look at this Houston team with how hot that they've been in, don't be surprised they could make a deep run in the West, especially how I feel like the West could be really open this year. And I feel like when you look at all those teams in the Western Conference, you can definitely make a case that all those teams still has a chance to win the Western Conference and make it to MLS Cup. Then we go to Sporting KC. For Sporting KC, I think they could go for a deep run. I mean, that's kind of the thing with Peter Vermees' team. His team does have times where they can go on a deep run, though there are times where there could be heartbreaks that we've seen Sporting KC suffer in the playoffs. Though I will say that every time it feels like they go into the deep playoff run, it's usually the conference semifinal and the conference final that they kind of stumble. But still, that's still considered a deep run in my book, and especially with the way that they finally started to get things going. I mean, the attack has started to click to a point that they were hoping that was the case, and the defense have looked really solid lately. I'm surprised that this is a team that it could make a deep playoff run, and especially they have the veteran experience and have the players that have been to that moment before and could definitely pull it off once again. I mean, it's not only the fact that you want to have a good team, but playoff experience is a very important thing because playoffs is completely different animal and completely different atmosphere compared to what we see in the regular season. Then we go to LAFC. Yeah, I would say LAFC is definitely a favorite. I mean, and I think LAFC is kind of reminds me of what we saw with NYCFC a couple of years ago. Remember how I said a couple of weeks ago when LAFC was struggling to score goals and how if they can just find that one goal, they will break out. That's what happened. They finally got that goal, and that was on a route where they won 5-1 against Minnesota, and it seems like all their attacking woes have been solved. And this is kind of a very similar story what we saw with NYCFC where they had a bit of a goal drought under Ronnie Dalia, but they figured it out, and then they went on a relatively good run heading into the playoffs, and we'll see that whether or not if that is going to be the case once again for this LAFC team. I mean, when you look at talent wise, I mean they definitely have the talent to do so. Denise Bwanga is going to be an absolute stud in the playoffs, and I won't be surprised he's going to be the guy that carried the torch in terms of getting this team deep into a playoff run. But again, you just simply cannot write off LAFC. I mean, there's a reason why they're the defending champion. Though I will say that it's been a long time since we have seen a team won back-to-back MLS Cup champion, and it's also not often you see a team that make back-to-back MLS Cup unless your name is Toronto FC or it's the Seattle Sounders. But I do have a feeling LAFC could do so, especially again. If you believe what the media said, LAFC will always consider to be the favorites of going deep into the playoffs. Then we go to the San Jose Earthquakes. Yep, they need a miracle run to make it to the playoffs. So it feels like the Quakes are kind of a team where, when you look at the last couple of playoff appearances, they're kind of the team that just about made it to the playoffs, and then they suffer a first round exit. And I feel like this probably is going to be the same case. And I've said it before in the review too, where I'm pretty sure the league is not going to get denied a Sporting KC versus St. Louis kind of playoff match. I mean, can you imagine how crazy that the playoff atmosphere would that be? And as much as I've said Atlanta and Columbus is definitely going to be a spicy matchup, oh, you better believe a St. Louis versus Sporting KC kind of matchup is going to definitely amp up the atmosphere of those venues. I mean, both stadium is just going to be absolute rocking if that is going to be a potential matchup. But in order for that to happen, the Quakes, of course, has to be the sacrifice. And that, again, knowing this Quakes team, how they just barely scrape into the playoffs, and they have the same issue Dallas have problems in terms of goal scoring, and also they have problems in terms of winning on the road. Yeah, I mean, unless if somehow they finally broke through that curse and finally win their first playoff game since 2010. I mean, it's hard to believe the Quakes have not won a playoff game in that long of a period, and I don't think it's going to happen again, especially when they have to face against a really good Sporting KC team. Then we go to the Seattle Sounders. Yeah, Seattle, I'm going to say they're right up here where, again, I've said this before in the review. It feels like this is a very classic Brian Schmitz's Seattle Sounders team where they might have had some struggle during part of the season, but then when it's kind of come to playoff time, it is Schmitza time because Schmitza time is usually the time where when the Sounders team get into the playoffs and they go on deep run almost every time. I mean, just ignore what happened last year when they didn't make it, and also what happened the year prior when they got surprisingly knocked out by RSL. This is a team that I think could make a deep playoff run. You simply cannot write off the Seattle Sounders when playoff time begin for them to not make a deep playoff run, and with the way that they're coming into the playoffs with a 9-game unbeaten streak, this feels like it's a story we've seen before with Brian Schmidt's Seattle Sounder team getting a second half resurgent and coming into the playoffs hot. Don't be surprised they're going to be once again dominating in the playoffs, and to the dismay of pretty much a lot of Western Conference team, we might see the trend once again uh, uh, happen again, where maybe last year was kind of a blip where we didn't see a Cascadia team made it to the Western Conference final and eventually won the Western Conference. Feels like maybe order is going to be restored. The fact that Seattle is going to run the table and probably is going to reach MLS Cup once again. Then we go to St. Louis City, and St. Louis is a very tough one for me to put them here. I mean, I'm gonna say I don't want to put them as a dark horse. I also don't want to put them as they need a Cinderella run because it's been a great season, and I also don't want to put them if everything goes right because pretty much everything has go right so far. So I will say that maybe they're kind of right here where I think they can make a deep playoff run again, if you look at St. Louis and that this is a team that really is playing with house money right now. I mean, it's just been an absolute Cinderella expansion kind of season, and now it's all about when how is that going to continue? And unfortunately, as the old saying goes, all Cinderella stories gonna strike midnight, and that. I don't know if this team is gonna go do something that the '98 Chicago Fire is gonna do, but one thing I am certain is that St. Louis, just as you kind of write them off, yeah, they somehow find a way to make even more history. So don't be surprised this team could go deep into the playoffs. Kind of similar to what we see with Austin last season, where this really reminds me of that team where not a lot of people think, well, they made it to the playoffs for the first time, but are they going to go deep into the playoffs? Oh, they only made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, and I think that could be the case for St. Louis too. They can definitely has the talent and has the ability to reach deep into the playoffs. Especially, it also helped the fact that they get to play in front of their home fans, and again, that crowd at City Park with how that is probably one of the most electric atmosphere in the league. I don't think that's going to be a stadium that if you're a visiting team you want to be in and trying to get a win. That's going to be a really tough place to do so to walk out with a win, and that may be enough for St. Louis to really go deep into the playoffs. And then we go to RSL. Yeah, it's got to be here. I mean, everything has to go right for this RSL team, especially with the fact that this team has been kind of a little bit inconsistent. There's been times where the attack has been good. There's been times it hasn't been good. There's been times that that defense is going to be good, and then there's time isn't good. Inconsistency is not going to get you deep into the playoffs. And this is where, if you're Pablo Mastrani, everything needs to go right. And I think this is where maybe they can channel the 2021 run that they had, or actually the 2022 run that they had. Or is it 2022? No, it was a 2021 run that they had where they reached all the way to the Western Conference final before falling to the Portland Timbers. And that also, if they can continue to do well on the road, which is they got their wish with the fact that they don't get home field advantage against Houston, and also they won't get home field advantage probably for some of those playoff game. Maybe they can run the table because apparently this team feels more comfortable this season playing on the road. But again, the inconsistency is what I'm concerned with this RSL team, and that inconsistency is not going to do it if you want to make a run into the playoffs. And then finally, we look at the Vancouver Whitecaps. I guess the Whitecaps are kind of a dark horse team. I feel like as much as I know the attention is with the Houston Dynamo, I feel like the Whitecaps could be a dark horse team mainly because Vinny Sartini, you don't know what he's gonna throw up. You don't know what kind of magical moment he's going to do. And not to mention, I think the dynamic duo of Ryan Gull and Brian White, that is probably the most underrated dynamic duo I've seen. I can't believe there's not a lot of media attention talk about how good these two player is, because these two player has just really form a very good chemistry in terms of making deep playoff run, and that I have a feeling they could do the same thing here. Though again, as I've said before, a couple years when they were a dark horse, when they finally make it to the playoffs and they fall against Sporting KC. So hopefully it might not be the same case, though it's not going to be easy because they do have to face against LAFC, and we'll see whether if this is going to be the time where they can knock down LAFC, because I will say that as much as it's a tall order for Vancouver to face LAFC, they had some success against LAFC this season. Well, if you don't look at the CONCACAF Champions League, that is, but in terms of the league play, and this is also where as for LAFC, as much as I think, going back to what I said, they are the favorites to defend their crown. It's always difficult to defend an MLS Cup champion, and Vancouver might actually not be a team that I think be a favorable matchup, at least for their first round of the playoff matchup that we'll see. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of me ranking where each of these team is gonna be in terms of tier list of, are they the favorites of winning MLS Cup? Are they the one that could go on deep run? Are they a dark horse? Are they a team that kind of feel like they need to have everything that goes right so that they can make a deep playoff run? Or are these are kind of the team that is on an outside shot? Either way, the old saying, in playoffs anything can happen, and we have seen some crazy miracle stories before and some Cinderella run before. So yeah, we'll see whether or not if the chaos of MLS playoffs is going to bring to the table once again this year. But either way, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and also let me know in the comments below your prediction of who's going to win MLS Cup. I'm not going to make a prediction of who's going to win MLS Cup, because if I do, I want to apologize to the team immediately in advance, because they're probably not going to win the MLS Cup. I mean, every year I think I predict who's going to win MLS Cup, and that team either lose in the first round or they end up not going very deep into the playoffs. So this is why I did this video this year, where I can't really jinx a team unless if you think that team I put as the favorites are considered to be a jinx, and now knowing that they're probably not going to do much in the playoffs this year. But like I said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.